They declared war against us in 1979. Has the day finally come for regime change in Iran? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Before we get into this episode, I encourage you to watch the episode that Steve Green hosted this week about the military capabilities of Israel vis-a-vis Iran. But we're going to talk about two specific individuals in this episode. And Steve, I'd like to start with you. And basically, this whole show is going to be around two quotes. And the first one for you, Steve, is from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and colloquially known as Bibi. They asked him about regime change in Iran, and I want to read you his comment. It could certainly be the result. This is the result of these last several days of attacks from Israel on Iran. It could certainly be the result because the Iran regime is very weak. I think it's basically left with two things. Its plans to have atomic bombs and ballistic missiles. That's basically what Iran has. They certainly don't have the people. 80% of the people would throw those theological thugs out. Stephen Green, what kind of thing is this for the prime minister of a puny little state in the Middle East surrounded by enemies? What kind of thing is this for him to say?
Well, I think it's right on the money. We don't know how this thing is going to play out. The ballistic missile threat, as I talked about in my segment this week, is being very rapidly reduced. Iran is now lucky to put 10 or 12 missiles in the air at once. But this is not a boots-on-the-ground operation. This is not nation building like we got caught up in mistakenly in Iraq and Afghanistan. If there is regime change, it has to come from the people of Iran themselves. They have a once in 46-year opportunity here to get rid of these people, to get rid of the mullahs, and the people of Iran hate these guys. They really, really do. But again, it's not our job to do it. That said, there are a few things that need to be made explicit here. One is that with the ballistic missile threat looking like it's closer and closer to being in the rearview mirror, Iran, the mullahs, only have one card left to play, and that is the big nuclear enrichment facility at Fordow, which is buried under 200 feet of mountain and rock. The only way to get to it by air that I know of is with a GBU-47, I think. That's the big bunker buster. That's the 30,000-pound one that can cut through some of that and then go boom. And even so, it might take several of those. And if I remember correctly, there are only 20 of them in our entire inventory. We'd probably need 4 or 5 of those just to be sure to take out Fordow. And even then, it could only be delivered by B-2 stealth bomber. It's the only plane in the world equipped to carry this particular bomb. And I would rather us not do it. I think the Israelis would rather not us do this. There are other ways to get at this facility, I assume, and I assume that when Israel started this Operation Rising Lion last week, they had an end game in mind for dealing with Fordow. Once Fordow is gone, it's very difficult to imagine a regime to suffer the way the mullahs have suffered in the last 5 days and still survive. They were never loved. They never enjoyed any kind of popular legitimacy, and when they can't even defend the airspace, they can't even put up a show of resistance at their own capital. I don't know how a regime survives that. Still, the mullahs are very crafty. They've stayed in power for 46 years, and they still have Fordow. So the way to peace is capturing or destroying that facility. But as to what comes next, we're not going to impose democracy like we tried a couple other times in the Middle East. The Israelis certainly aren't going to do it. They don't have the manpower to even think of that sort of thing. It's up to the people of Iran. This is their moment. I pray they take it.
Bill Whittle, the second person to comment on this story on an international scale is, of course, Donald Trump, who posted on Truth Social that we know where the Ayatollah Khamenei is hiding. And as President Trump said it, he's safe for now. He's an easy target, Trump said.
No, we're not.
And we're not going to take him out, at least not for now, is what Trump said. Bill, this doesn't strike me as something that would give the Ayatollah a sense of safety?
I don't want him to have a sense of safety. You know what? I see an analogy here with the people of Iran and the people of the Soviet Union. The time period was longer for the Soviet Union, but obviously in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution, there was a great deal of religious fervor that was untapped underneath that society, and the corruption of the Shah and some of the measures that the Shah used in order to maintain his regime had built up a lot of animosity among the people, and so they saw the Islamic Revolution as a source of pride, and the entire country was completely agitated. But that's a long time ago, and the people who were the young radicals in 1979 are either very old now or already gone. The same is true for the Soviet Union. Despite the brutality of all of the purges and the murder, 20 million of their own citizens killed by their own government. In the early days of the Soviet Union, the early decades of the Soviet Union, their people believed in that system. They were proud of it. They'd gone from an agricultural backwater to one of the two superpowers. By the time you get to the late 50s, early 60s, they had put the first man into space. They had something really to be proud of. But then came Brezhnev and the inevitable decline of the Soviet Union, the period of stagnation. And by the time you got to the fall of the Soviet Union, nobody really believed in the principles of the country anymore. It just took one kind of sharp hit to collapse it, because it was basically rotten from the inside. You look at statistics like this, the regime is so brutal. And when you hear things like 80% of the population want to get rid of them, the American mind just immediately says, what the hell's wrong with those people? Why don't they just simply overthrow them? I had the same feeling about the Russian people in the Soviet Union when you're looking at the brutality and the poverty and the police state and just the sheer bureaucracy and criminal incompetence. Why don't these people simply rise up and overthrow their governments? What's the matter with them? And the answer is twofold. In the case of both the Russian people and the Iranian people, the people who are natural leaders of rebellion, the kind of people with the personal idealism and heroism necessary to launch a rebellion, have been killed, and have been killed enthusiastically and quite thoroughly over the course of both of those regimes. You wonder why doesn't somebody just start a revolution the way we did here? Well, over the many, many, many decades, the people who were built to start a revolution were killed. And that leads to the second one of the two factors. And that is that when all of your heroic leaders, when the people who would be the heroes of your population have been killed, it puts the rest of the people, which is the huge majority of the people, into a state of terror that leads to inaction. The thing that I think in the case of the Soviet Union and the Iranian people, the thing that they are afraid of is something that they should no longer fear because it doesn't have teeth anymore. But that's a hard thing to sell 2 or 3 or 4 generations of people who've seen dissidents just simply murdered in the streets. I'll tell you one thing that does give me a great deal of hope, though. We came very close to seeing the end of this Iranian cancer. In 2009, I think it was, with the Arab Spring and the Green Revolution. And the reply from the United States of America under Barack Obama was dead silence. There were riots in the streets getting ready to overthrow the regime that is responsible for essentially all of the world's terrorism. And the response from the United States of America was silence. They're not getting silence this time. They know that Donald Trump is fully on their side. And I think the most effective thing that Donald Trump can do to protect the United States from terrorism and is not to launch these B-2 strikes on this target. I think the most effective thing that Donald Trump can do would be to make a national address, short and to the point, that basically says that the American people, the side of the freedom-loving people of the world, in fact, the entire world, is on the side of you against these mullahs. the suffering that you've lived under is largely due to sanctions that have been imposed as a result of all of these criminal behaviors. The lifting of those sanctions will enrich your country, and your spiritual relief is just around the corner, but it is up to you to achieve it. It cannot be given to you. And frankly, I think he should just come out and say it. If you don't have the courage to overthrow these people, then you don't deserve to be free. This is not a gift. It is a reward that comes from courage and willingness to sacrifice. And our country paid that price and continues to pay it. And freedom country, loving countries around the world have paid that price. It's your turn to step up. And we know that the Iranian people, the great Persian people, have long histories of this kind of heroism. But the world is on your side. And if you're waiting to be rescued, you're going to live another 100 years under this tyranny. We support you and we back you, but it's time for you to act. That's what I would urge the president to do.
I have the great privilege of working with several second-generation Persians where I work, and two of the major vendors that we work with in that business are organizations that were founded by people who had to get out in 1979 and come to the United States and establish fantastic businesses where they're greatly successful. Because of that, this is very human to me. I've never been to Iran. I don't pretend to have any inside knowledge of the way that goes. And my friends whose families are from Iran don't talk about Iran most of the time. But I know them, and they are brilliant and kind and joyful people. They are super smart. One of my colleagues that I'm working with is working on a medical degree at the same time while working alongside me. And when you meet these kind of people and realize that there's a whole nation full of these kind of people that you never get to meet because these mullahs and ayatollahs have kept them under their boot, I think this is what moved me most about Benjamin Netanyahu's comment when he said they basically have the dream of an atomic bomb and ballistic missiles, but they certainly don't have the people. 80% of the people would throw these theological thugs out. What Netanyahu is saying is not that we want to conquer Iran. He is saying we are engineering a jailbreak for the people who long for freedom in that country and who haven't seen it in several generations now because of this group of thugs that's running the country. I hope that some of the people in Iran get to hear this message and that it spreads throughout their networks. And I hope they begin to understand how undermined the Ayatollah Khamenei is now that some of his closest associates and co-conspirators have been picked off. Because as Bill and Steve have pointed out, getting down several hundred feet of dirt into a mountain to destroy a nuclear facility is not impossible, but it's certainly a very difficult task if you're trying to do it with bunker-busting bombs. But in my mind, the Moab, the mother of all bombs, is the Iranian people. And as Bill pointed out, they have an extraordinary opportunity in history right now, and they have the most unlikely of friends, headquartered in Jerusalem, saying, "Come out, my brothers, be free." For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.